Sports, a bridge that brings people together. And here in the Commonwealth, it's no different. From the gridiron to the hardwood and beyond, we all have a team we love to talk about. Now for the teams you care about, here's Heartland Sports Live with Trevor Rice.
Welcome into another edition of Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM, and we live stream every single show on ESPNKY.com. Trevor Rice hanging out with you, and we've got a lot to talk about, of course. This is one of those times of the year where you're talking about a lot of championships going on. In particular, we just wrapped up the NHL season. We just wrapped up the NBA season. We just wrapped up the KHSAA softball tournament, which featured Central Hardin this past weekend. Let's see, what else are we talking about here in the near future? NASCAR Kentucky Speedway is coming next month, so we'll have that to look forward to here in the coming weeks. And coming up today, we're talking some college football. I'll have Phil Steele, his 2019 college football preview magazine is coming out, or is out. You can go and order yours now. But that's coming up next segment. I'll have Phil Steele. We'll talk about Kentucky, Louisville, just the college football landscape in general going into 2019. We'll talk a little Hilltoppers action with him as well. So be listening next segment for that. Phil Steele is on today's show, as well as Joe Zerhusen, who is of course, you hear him when you go to Great American Ballpark up in Cincinnati, the PA announcer, plus he helps us here being an affiliate with the Reds whenever we have any questions or concerns, or whenever I want him to come on my show and to talk about the Reds, and he's going to talk about some promotions going on at Great American Ballpark as well this summer. So that's to look forward to this hour. Of course, on the NHL side, we wrapped up the season. The Blues winning their first championship ever, their first Stanley Cup. You have, on the NBA side, the Raptors not only getting the first win in their franchise history, but also the first championship really in Canada in general. So big news there for the Raptors as they, I want to say they upset the Warriors, but I don't know if you want to call that an upset, just for the fact that the Warriors did have some injuries, key injuries that, were kind of relevant in their roster, aka Kevin Durant. Klay Thompson kind of went down late in that game. But regardless, the Raptors came to play. They came to win a championship. They walked out of Oracle Arena with the championship. Now let's look at some action that happened here closer to home. In Lexington, it was the fast pitch tournament, the softball side, and it was Central Hardin finally playing Warren East. They were supposed to play last weekend, or I guess now technically 2 weekends ago, but they ended up playing, over the weekend, this past weekend, and that kind of, I guess, affects a team mentally. When you're focused, you're psyched up to play on a certain day, and then Mother Nature postpones things for a week. Well, she didn't postpone it. The KHSAA ended up postponing it an additional week. So now you got to go through the preparations of getting ready again, and then try to psych yourself up for another game, which I don't think it takes much for a high schooler to do so. But when you are emotionally going for something to happen on a certain time, a certain day, and then it doesn't happen, it's depressing. It's one of those things that it just affects you mentally, and I don't want to use that as an excuse for Central Hardin, because I don't think it did affect them in that way. I just think they were just beaten by Warren East over the weekend on Saturday. But just looking at that game, they lose 4-1 to Warren East, which Warren East, there's a reason why this team finished second in the KHSAA softball state tournament. I'm just saying. I mean, they were that good. In fact, we look at this year's tournament. Let's just go ahead and look at some of these games. And you had Oldham County losing to Mail early in the opening round, 9-0. Boyle County won 3-2 against Woodford County. Madison North Hopkins won 4-2 over Marshall County. Clay County shut out Wolfe County 3-0. Also in first round action, Ashland Blazer won 1-0 over Johnson Central. Warren East totally annihilated Davis County 10-1. Central Hardin won 6-2 over Butler in the opening round, and the last game in the opening round was Pendleton County winning 1-0 over Dixie Heights. Second round action in this year's softball tournament saw this: Male winning 4-0 over Boyle County. Madison North Hopkins fell to Clay County by the score of 4-2 runs. Warren East 8-1 winners over Ashland Blazer. Central Hardin won 12-0, just a complete shutdown of Pendleton County in the second round. Third round action, Male ended up winning, doubling up on Clay County by the final run tally of 2-1. Warren East on Saturday won 4-1 over Central Hardin, and so the championship looked like this. On Saturday night, Male won 6-1 over Warren East to become the state championships at John Kropp Stadium over the weekend. But Central Hardin, they finished third overall. You can't go home. Sorry about that. Best season in Central Hardin Lady Bruins history in the softball tournament. You got to appreciate the effort and what this team brought this year. Accountability. They were willing to make changes on the roster when the coach demanded it, and they had a winning attitude. Of course, this team has a winning attitude every single season, but this year there was just something a little bit different about the team, and I think when it's all said and done, we're going to be looking back at this year's Central Hardin team as one of those that, if they do win a state title here in the coming years, maybe this was one of the founding, or one of the teams that kind of got that ball rolling a little bit in that direction so that this team could come through for that state championship. I guess we'll have to find out. Only time will tell in that case what these younger girls on the roster will do here in the coming years. But there's a lot of excitement for Central Hardin fans moving forward. Also, some news locally that happened. The Tennessee Titans, who we are affiliates with. In fact, I expect to have Mike Keith on here sooner or later. Just because August is almost here, and of course the preseason goes on. So we got to talk to Mike Keith about what the Titans look like here in 2019 under head coach Mike Vrabel. But some big news coming out last week that going on this year, they are going to retire the numbers 27 and 9, respectively, for, well, let's be honest, two of the toughest individuals you'll find on the gridiron. Eddie George, who wore number 27, and also Steve Air McNair, who wore number 9. In fact, we have a thing hanging up in the 106.1 ESPN radio studio signed by him. The guy once played with a broken rib, I do believe, if I recall that story. And I would love to just have that discussion with Mike Keith the next time we talk, because he will tell you that he was the toughest player that he ever got to watch in person. Of course, Mike Keith's been the voice of the Titans ever since that historic run back in the Super Bowl. So when you've seen all these players come through and you've gotten to witness them on the field, you know who's got it, who doesn't, who is tough as nails, who isn't. And I respect Mike Keith's word in saying that Steve McNair was one of the toughest guys to ever play on the football field. So those two guys having their numbers retired this coming year, and that's a good thing. Kudos to the Tennessee Titans for going ahead and doing that. Trevor Rice with you, and once again, we're doing it this week. I need to give away these bobbleheads. 270-982-1073. The first three people to text me the word Reds along with their name will get a Reds bobblehead. I'm not going to tell you who they are or anything of that nature. I need to get them out. And if you're a Reds fan, you're not going to be disappointed regardless. So go ahead and text me the word Reds along with your name, 270-982-1073, and the first three people to do so, I will have a bobblehead with your name on it. It's that simple. Well, the Cincinnati Reds, who you can hear weekdays on 106.1 ESPN radio all throughout the season this summer, they wrapped up a 3-game series with the Texas Rangers yesterday. They dropped a couple both Friday and Saturday, ended up winning big yesterday by the final score of 11-3. The inconsistency, though, of this Redlegs club this year has been painful. If you're a Reds fan, you have been banging your head on walls, probably suffering multiple concussions. if not broken fist from punching the wall and going through, and then you need another door or another wall to punch, so you break your other fist as well. It's been frustrating. This team, for the longest time, hovering between 4 and 6 games under 500. They got to within 3 games of 500, then they slipped again, and now we're 7 games below 500 after losing the series with the Texas Rangers this weekend. They lost 7-1 on Friday. They lose 4-3 on Saturday, and then they win 11-3 yesterday after splitting a series with the Indians in a 2-game short series earlier this week, losing 2-1 on Tuesday, winning 7-2 on Wednesday. So I guess your main question, if you're a Reds fan, is will this team ever develop enough consistency to actually pull off a winning streak? That is yet to be seen. I think the most this team's won is 2 or 3 wins. I have to go back and actually look. But the most they've won consistently back to back to back is probably like 3, maybe 4 games. And that was back earlier in the season. Otherwise, it seems like it's win, loss, loss, win, loss, loss. And it just keeps that trend going. And they never make any headway. It's very frustrating if you're a Reds fan. And I'm right there with you. It's really irritating. In fact, some fans are calling on social media to blow this team up again. I don't know if it's that serious because I feel like they're just a little bit away from having things figured out. I have a feeling. But then again, if you're a Reds fan, you've had a feeling that this team could do something here for the last few years, and they seem to let you down every single season. So let me back up and say that maybe they do need to make a couple of big roster moves once again like they did this past offseason. It does seem to have helped them a little bit to the point that they're better than last year. But it's still not enough to have a winning record in the National League Central, which people will argue is the most difficult league to actually play in. Because you're paired with teams like the Cubs, who have been good here in recent years, the Cardinals, who have a tradition. Pirates have been improving here the last few years. And then the Brewers. Brewers have been one of the better teams there in the regular season over the past couple of seasons. So when you are in the toughest division in all of baseball, it makes it very frustrating for a fan who has expectations that this team should be winning, which every fan base should want their team to go out and win every single game. But when you have the history that the Reds do, you have a Hall of Fame broadcaster in Marty Brennaman who gets frustrated watching this team. And then that kind of spills over into the fan base because they share those same frustrations with Marty. It just becomes a toxic atmosphere at that point, to the fact that I guess some fans would want this team to be blown up and I guess a retry. But I feel like they have some good pieces on this team. It's just they haven't been consistent in the way that they approach every single game. One game it could be a pitching flaw. One game it just could be a lack of offense. If only we could get this to go, consistently. They've been putting up the runs. It seems like they have the offense at times. And then there's sometimes where they can only put up one run. I don't get it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm an expert at baseball by any stretch of the imagination, but I can tell you if I was a Reds fan, I'd be pretty ticked off. Because the All-Star break is coming. Yes, they're not mathematically eliminated yet because we're not to the All-Star break. But every year, it seems like that All-Star break gets a little closer and closer. And Reds fans, by midsummer, are already like, all right, team's done. Guess I can go do something with the kids now. In which that something used to be go to the ballpark with the kids. Except now, it's you sit there and, I don't know, you go and mow the lawn now. I don't know. You do something more productive. But I can see the frustration. And hopefully they can get things turned around. They can build off of this win against the Rangers. We've talked about this before. We'll see if maybe they continue their homestand. They play a 3-game series with the Astros this week, today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. We'll talk to Joe Zerhusen later in the hour, see if he can talk me off the ledge here. Because it's been frustrating to watch. They'll play a National League Central opponent to close out the week, and the Brewers this weekend in a 4-game series, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So hopefully they can win this series with the Astros and build some momentum going into the Brewers series this weekend, because if not, hostility, frustrations will boil over, I'm going to presume. Social media, it's both a beautiful thing and it's a curse and a bad thing at times, because you see the worst in people and you can also see the best in people as well. Most likely it's going to be the worst, though. Trevor Rice with you. I'll have Phil Steele coming up. College football season is almost here, people. We're just over 2 months away, and we're going to talk Kentucky football with Phil. We're going to talk Louisville as well, Western Kentucky. What does the landscape look like in 2019 for all three of these teams? Because 2 of the 3 had terrible seasons a year ago. The one team that did do good has some question marks coming into 2019 after having to replace some key pieces, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Running back game, I'm not really concerned there. But can we see improved quarterback play from Touchdown Terry possibly this season? Will we see more action from the receiving core? And will the defense be there again for Kentucky? How will they compete in the SEC East? We'll find out with Phil coming up here in a bit. The Cardinals have their head coach fired, bring in a new coaching staff, have one of the worst years in the past decade or decade plus for the Cardinals. Last year, they can only go up this season. We'll talk about that. And Western Kentucky, when will that explosive offense that we saw a couple of years ago come back? I guess it'd be more like 3 years ago now at this point. We could see it this year. Will a Conference USA Championship be on the horizon for WKU? We'll talk to Phil Steele. Coming up next, it's Heartland Sports Live. You can follow me on social media at Radio Trevor Rice on Twitter, Trevor Rice on -air. Like me on Facebook as well, as we do this show every Monday, 5 until 6, unless something comes up otherwise. It's Heartland Sports Live, ESPNKY.com. Catch the live stream. And welcome back to Heartland Sports Live. Joining me right now, we had him on last year. Let's go ahead and bring him on again. Phil Steele is talking about his 2019 college football preview magazine. You can follow him on Twitter at Phil Steele. That's STEELE042 on Twitter. And we're going to talk some college football right now. Of course, looking ahead to the Kentucky football season, Louisville football season, and just going to see what the landscape looks like overall for 2019. Phil, it's been a year. How have you been?
I am doing great, Trevor, especially with the fact the magazine's done. That's 6 months of hard work we pour into the magazine, the whole staff working on it from the Sunday after Thanksgiving all the way through the end of May. And, we come out a little later than all the other magazines out there, but I think it's a big advantage in the fact that with this transfer portal, May was a very active month for the transfer portal. You got players like DeAndre Francois playing at Florida Atlantic this year, where he's not going to be in any other magazine because they were in a rush to hit the newsstand. So, but the magazine's done, and so now I'm just doing the radio shows, and life is good.
Yeah, and you could never, we're in June, you could never look too far ahead to the college football season. Of course, everybody's looking towards late August, early September for these games to get going. And you look at the top 2 dogs right now in college football recently. It's Alabama and Clemson. Is it going to be a different story this year, or is it pretty much going to be those 2 that everybody's talking about?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the overall talent, experience level coming back, it's not like either one lost a lot. I mean, Clemson did lose some good players off the defensive line, but they still have my number 5 rated defensive line coming into the season. I think you're looking at the 2 most explosive offenses in college football, led by maybe the 2 best quarterbacks in college football. Tua Tagovailoa had a great year last year. Remember, he got banged up down the stretch, didn't play a lot in the fourth quarter, but he still had a 43-6 ratio. And he's thrown to the best set of receivers in the country with my number 6 rated offensive line. And defensively, Alabama only had 3 returning starters last year. They've got 6 returning starters this year, so they'll be better on defense. They're clearly one of the top 2 teams in the country, and then the same thing with Clemson. I think that they're going to battle Alabama for the highest scoring offense in the country. Trevor Lawrence is a guy that didn't start all year, but once he took over, he was dynamic. Who could forget the bowl game he had, carving up Alabama for 44 points like they did. And then they've got one of the best set of running backs, led by Travis Etienne, the second best set of receivers in the country, one of the top offensive lines. Now, defensively, like I said, while they lose their top 4 defensive linemen, 3 first-round picks and a third-round pick, they still have my number 5 rated defensive line. Keep your eyes on Xavier Thomas this year, Justin Foster, a couple of new names you'll know by the end of the season. And when you look at Clemson's schedule and Alabama's schedule, Bama figures to be a double-digit favorite in every game this year. Clemson figures to be favored by at least 17 points in every game this year. I think you're going to see a lot of blowouts and a lot of expectation for those 2 meeting in the championship.
Is that just because the conferences are down for the SEC and ACC, or is that just because they're that good compared to the competition?
I think it's because they're that good. As I mentioned with Alabama, I don't have them that large of a favorite. They've got some tests on the schedule, like at Texas A&M. I've got them about a 10-point favorite in that game. I think it'll be a good game. A&M's dangerous at home. Heck, A&M almost knocked off Clemson at home last year. They have to play LSU, a legitimate top 10 team. They have to play Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Now, Auburn is actually number 10 in my power poll. So Alabama's schedule, I think, has a few more landmines than does Clemson's.
Who do you have as maybe the other 2 teams to pop into that championship for when it comes to the end of the season? I know Clemson and Alabama, everybody's pretty much marking them as 2 spots that are filled already. Who do you think maybe sneaks in there on the other 2?
Well, it was tough for me to pick the 4th one. The 3rd one I went with was Michigan, and I know Michigan didn't finish off their season well last year. In fact, they got blown out in their final 2 games. And they haven't gotten past Ohio State a single season since Jim Harbaugh's been there. But I think this is the year they do it. Now, they lose some key players on defense, but I'll take you back to 2017. They had just 1 returning starter on defense and allowed just 18.8 points per game, 271 yards per game. The key is Don Brown, and Don Brown's got 5 starters back on D. They'll be one of the tops in the country. Offensively, they bring in Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator from Alabama. And he's switching the offense up, and I think that's going to make Shea Patterson a much more dangerous QB. They're going to the spread this year as opposed to the pro style with the 2 tight ends and the fullback. And I think you're going to see a very good Michigan offense. And the key to me, for me picking them in the playoffs, is their toughest 3 games of the year. Notre Dame, Michigan State, and Ohio State. They're all at home. Harbaugh's 24-4 at home. I think Michigan finally lives up to that potential, runs the table, and makes the playoff. Now, the choice for number 4 is extremely difficult. I can make a great case for Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a team that has got Jalen Hurts coming in at quarterback. Can he be the 3rd straight Heisman winner there? They've got an improved defense this year. The biggest question marks I have for Oklahoma would be the offensive line, which returns just 1 starter, and a little bit on the schedule, but not that much. Their road games are against UCLA, Kansas, Kansas State, Baylor, and Oklahoma State, all winnable. I think they'll be favored in every game, but I went with Georgia. And with Georgia, you're looking at a team that's even better than last year's squad. They've got Jake Fromm at quarterback. DeAndre Swift leads a deep, talented running back corps. The offensive line, I rate number 2 in the country. Defensively, they're strong. Last year, they were rather inexperienced on defense. This year, they're much more experienced. And when you look at their schedule this year, they'll probably be favored in all 12 games. And it could be an undefeated Georgia against an undefeated Alabama in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you if those 2 teams meet up, which it's likely they possibly will. Who do you see winning that game?
I have Alabama winning it, but we saw last year's title game. Georgia sure looked like they were on the way to win in that one. And they're not going to come into that game fearing Alabama. They're going to come in expecting to win that game against Alabama. But as I just mentioned, I think the loser of that game, whether it's Alabama or Georgia, probably makes the playoffs anyway.
We have Phil Steele. He's talking about his 2019 college football preview magazine. You can go and pick yours up at Phil Steele 042. Follow him on Twitter. Let's talk about some area football here, Phil. Kentucky having one of its best seasons ever in its history of the entire program a season ago. They're going to lose some key pieces off of that team. Where do you see the Wildcats finishing in the SEC East come 2019?
Well, I do think it's going to be a step back for Kentucky, which would be the first time under Mark Stoops that they would have taken a step back, because they've actually had the same record or improved their record each year that he's been there. But I think the key is probably going to be November 9th, where they finish in there when they host Tennessee. If they can knock off Tennessee, then all of a sudden Kentucky can be. I would put them in the middle of the conference at that point. Kentucky only has 10 returning starters, one of the least experienced teams in the league. They'll be a clear-cut underdog when they play Florida, at Mississippi State, and at South Carolina. But Kentucky surprised me in years past, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them finish higher than I have them expected this year as well. And I think the key for them is, can Terry Wilson become a consistent passer? Last year we saw some games where Terry Wilson was a very good passer. Other games he had trouble connecting on a pass, but they've got the run game. They've got the receivers. You look at them defensively. While they only have 4 starters back, I like the overall talent they have there. So I think Kentucky, how they do in that month of November is going to determine how high they finish. They get Tennessee at home, Vanderbilt on the road. If they can win those 2 games, things are looking good.
The Louisville Cardinals had a lot, at least in this area, had a lot of expectations going into 2018. Fell extremely short. Of course, their coach gets fired. A new coaching staff comes in. What do you see for Louisville in the ACC here this season?
Well, they'll be improved. How can you not be after last year's miserable 2-10 season? And a lot of blowout wins. As you mentioned, Coach Petrino gets fired. Blowouts all over the place at the end of the year. They do have 16 returning starters coming back, which I think is a plus. I'm very, very high on Coach Satterfield. I think that when you look at Satterfield, what he did at App State, turning them into the dominant team in that conference, I think he's got a team that underachieved last year. There is more talent on the field than what they showed on the field last year. So I think they'll be improved. But are they going to make a bowl game? I don't see it happening this year. Generally, when a first-year head coach comes in, he's got to learn the players. Players have to learn new systems. And it's a rebuilding year. I think this will be a rebuilding year for Louisville. But I'm optimistic on the future, and there's actually more talent at Louisville than they showed on the field last year in that 2-10 season.
Who are some surprises that maybe you don't see in the championship for come season's end, but maybe you'll see some, maybe make some noise in the top 25 this season that weren't necessarily on the radar a year ago?
Well, my clear-cut number one surprise team, and by the way, my surprise teams are teams that are not in the top 10 at the start of the year that I think can actually make the playoff. And last year, my number one surprise team was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Notre Dame was not a top 10 team at the start of the year. Guess what? They made the playoff. Didn't show up very well against Clemson in the playoff game, but at least they made the playoff. This year, my number one surprise team is the Utah Utes. Now, they're coming way off the radar. I think a lot of folks, when they talk Pac-12, are talking about Washington. They're talking about Oregon. Nobody's really talking about Utah. But when you look at Utah, here's the different reasons I like them. First of all, I'm a defensive guy, and I like teams with dominant defensive lines. We saw that with Clemson last year. Well, Utah is my number one rated defensive line in the entire country. These guys are 10 or 11 deep on the D-line, tons of pass rushers, tons of big guys in the middle to stop the run. They've got an excellent core of linebackers with Bernard, a BYU transfer, Bowen, a Penn State transfer. Secondary looks solid. Jalen Johnson is a shutdown corner, a prototype NFL cornerback. So I think Utah's going to have one of the best defenses in the country. Now, last year, they lost their quarterback, Tyler Huntley, to injury. They lost their top running back, Zach Moss, who was going to be on the Maxwell Award list as one of the top players in the country. Both guys were lost after 9 starts with injury last year, yet they still finished 9-5, still had a good year. Well, those 2 guys are back. The offensive line looks better. The receiving core is probably the best they've had under Whittingham. And the schedule gets easier this year as well, whereas last year they were playing the top 3 teams out of the Pac-12 North. This year they avoid most of them. The toughest road games are at USC, at Washington, 2 winnable games for them. I've got Utah as my number one surprise team, or a non-top 10 team that I think has a shot at the playoff.
I'm gonna make you dig deep into your library here, your knowledge. But we are Western Kentucky Hilltoppers affiliates here in Elizabethtown. Looking at Conference USA, where do you see WKU finishing in Conference USA this season?
Well, the last couple of years have been sort of shocking for WKU because there was back-to-back double-digit win seasons, and then it fell off to 6 and 7, and last year to 3 and 9. That's why there's a new head coach in town. Now, I talked to Coach Helton for after the spring practices were over, and he does have 16 returning starters to work with. You look at the fact that Stephen Duncan, their quarterback, probably the most polished thrower they have. He's more of a pocket passer, or they could go with Ty Story, who's elusive. He's got scramble ability. He's the Arkansas transfer at the quarterback spot, and Davis Shanley's back as well. He's a quick release guy. So I think he'll figure out that quarterback situation, and they'll have improved quarterback play over what they had last year. The backfield looks pretty good. Quentin Baker is probably the best playmaker of the group of running backs, and I think Quentin Baker is going to have a good year. You look at the receiving core. Lucky Jackson is tough, competitive. He's a guy that's got that downfield ability. Offensive line's a veteran unit. And defensively, a guy like D'Angelo Malone, I think you're looking at an all-conference guy up front on defense, and that's a good place to start. Now, with that said, first-year head coaches, generally a learning curve, have to learn the players have to learn new systems. So I'm not exactly forecasting a bowl game for WKU, but it is possible. A lot of times when a new head coach comes in, if he has success early on, then the players buy into the program. Well, I think the Louisville game is a winnable game early in the year. I think UAB at home has a potential of that, at Old Dominion. And if they can start picking up some of these games early, I think you'll see a much better WKU team down the stretch, and that would give them a shot at the bowl. I like the way they finished last year. They had 2 very nice wins over UTEP and Louisiana Tech. We'll see if they can continue that momentum this year.
He's Phil Steele. Check out his 2019 College Football Preview magazine at PhilSteele042 on Twitter. How can people mainly go and find your magazine? How can they order one for themselves?
Well, I appreciate that, Trevor. Now, it hits the newsstands on June the 25th, so that's just in a couple of weeks. But if you can't wait till June the 25th, you can go to the website, which is philsteele.com, and there's 2 ways you can get it there. You can order the magazine with the cover of your choice at philsteele.com. Just click right on the front of the main menu, or you can go to digital magazines and download it and be reading it this afternoon or this evening. And when you get the digital magazine, you can download it to your iPhone, to your Android device, to your Kindle, or even to your computer. And once you purchase it for one, you've got them on all of them. And it saves a little wear and tear on the magazine as well. So just head to philsteele.com, either get the digital magazine or order your version today. And if you order it online today, we'll ship it out today.
If you're a college football enthusiast, go and check it out. Phil Steele, ladies and gentlemen. Phil, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to our discussions here in the future.
Sounds good, Trevor. Always enjoy our conversations, my friend.
Once again, I have some Reds bobbleheads that I need to give away. So go ahead and text 982-1073. That's 270-982-1073. Text the word Reds along with your name, and I am taking the first 3 people to text me for bobbleheads. I'm not going to tell you who they are. I can just tell you if you're a Reds fan, you will not be disappointed. So go ahead and text me the word Red or Reds and your name, and you will be qualified if you're one of the first 3 to win a bobblehead. So go ahead and do so right now, 270-982-1073. I will have Joe Zerhusen, speaking of the Cincinnati Reds, coming up next. It's Heartland Sports Live. Welcome back to Heartland Sports Live. Joining me right now on the phone line is Mr. Joe Zerhusen, broadcast and affiliates manager with the Cincinnati Reds, and helping us here on 106.1 ESPN Radio whenever, I want to bring him on, and if he has any details he needs to send out to us. Joe, how have you been?
I've been okay, Trevor. Always good to be on with you, man. I always enjoy it, and thank you for everything you guys do for us in that area.
Well, we definitely appreciate you, and I think we would appreciate most is some consistency out of this Reds organization, talking their on-the-field play, because it seems like, Joe, we're talking about the Reds winning, then they'll drop one. They may win two, and then they'll drop two, and it seems like we're never gaining anything on the overall record. In fact, we've actually slipped now. I think we're 7 games below 500. It was hovering between 4 and 6 there for a while. Why is this team just struggling to build some momentum and put together a string of wins?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with kind of coming together. It's an interesting dynamic. One thing, when you do start looking, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think at one point I was asking somebody yesterday, trying to remember, I think we were 3 games under 500 at one point, and now we're 7. But the consistency that you were asking about is there. It's just not the consistency that we're looking for. It's about a 500 consistency right now, or in that area. Whereas I think what can happen is I think that it's going to become a situation where this team, they can peel off 5, 6, 7, 8 games in a row, possibly. I really think the potential is there. I think the talent is there, and then get over that hump, and then make the consistency bar a little bit higher. Right now, even to be maintaining, I think there's a part of me that's still. We're looking at 5 weeks before the All-Star break, and we're looking at weeks here before the trade deadline. And quite honestly, I mean, do you think that we actually know yet whether this is a team that would be a buyer or a seller at the All-Star break? I mean, they're still in it, and that is one of the things that is very interesting with this situation. 8 games back, basically, for all intents and purposes, tied with Pittsburgh for 4th place, just percentage points behind them. But at the same time, we have a division that's very tough, that at the top they keep bouncing back and forth. We have a lot of games within the division. If this team can come together and peel off a few wins, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks. However, it's getting to that time. You've got to basically see it. To the essence of your question, what do I think? I think that it's still growing pains. I think that what you have is a situation with an organization where the manager and the coaches are totally different. The philosophy is a lot different, like a lot of other teams, leaning a little bit more into the analytics department and starting to use that a little bit more than they have in the past. We have used it as an organization, but never to the point that we are right now. I personally believe that this coaching staff was put together with that in mind. So you add the essence of a new manager and, for all intents and purposes, a completely new coaching staff, and then the players that have been brought into the mix. Yeah, we have the Joey Vottos and the people that, and Suarez, of course. We have those guys who have been with us, but at the same time, we have a whole new crop of some people. Jose Iglesias is in there. Nick Senzel is now up with the big club, and luckily that injury the other night, that ball to the eye, is just going to be a matter of time, and it wasn't anything super serious. Jesse Winker's getting a whole lot more playing time. You have Derek Dietrich, who has come on, Kyle Farmer, who has contributed, Van Meter. You go down the list as far as some of the position players, and then you have Tanner Roark, who is in there, new as far as the pitching staff is concerned, Sonny Gray. So you still have a group that's coming together as a group. And look, baseball is one of these things. These guys travel together for the whole season. They're with each other a lot. Chemistry is very important, and that's kind of where we are right now. I think that they're coming together as a group. Everything I hear as far as what's in the clubhouse is all very, very positive. I was involved Saturday in a Q&A session with some season ticket members early in the day before the game against the Rangers, and it was just Mr. Castellini, Dick Williams, our president of baseball operations, and David Bell. And the questions were interesting, had a lot to do with just what you're asking. And I was very encouraged by the responses coming back to a person. They were talking about the clubhouse being strong, being one where they are coming together. So again, is that going to translate out onto the field and wins? I certainly hope so. I think we saw something yesterday coming off of a couple of losses and what has been so far a pretty dismal June. And you saw a situation where Jesse, who hadn't been playing a lot, comes through. I think 5 RBIs. Puig getting hot a little bit. Joey Votto's starting to get hot. So I think that's it. I think that it's just a matter of bringing it all together. And look, some of the things that are happening with this team are still one-run ball games situation the other night in Saturday night's game, where an error in the first inning, which should have been an out that would have pretty much gotten Tanner Roark out of there with a pitch count in the teens. There's an error. All of a sudden, they score a couple of runs, and you can't give this Rangers club anything. I mean, they're going to take it, and in the end, that became the difference in between a win and a loss. But the bottom line was they settled down and got into the game and made it competitive.
Joe Zerhusen joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. Every fan base has one of those people who calls for things to blow up or just calls for a roster change or anything. Do you see this group of guys who are competing day in and day out? Do you see this group being a pretty solid crew heading into next year, or do you think the Reds, if things don't get figured out, might make some moves in the offseason?
Oh, heck, this is a situation, as I mentioned before, right now as we head toward the All-Star break, is this going to be a team that legitimately is going to be around a 500 club and one that could make some difference within the division, or is it going to be one of those where you start looking at, okay, who do we have and what can we get? I think the time frame on that is still to be determined, but as you look down, and I mentioned Jose Iglesias before, here's a guy whose stock has gone up tremendously this year, and he's a valuable addition to this club. You have Derek Dietrich right now, a little bit of a slide offensively, but still very, very hot. And then you get into Yasiel Puig and some of the parts that were put in there initially. Will there be some changes? Will there be some people, or will they try to keep this club together intact next year? I think a lot of that is going to depend on what happens the rest of the season, and also where you start looking at what pieces can be brought in. I mean, look, let's face it, we still have some guys down in the minor leagues. Taylor Trammell, who is one of our young guys, an outfielder that is a very big prospect. It's going to be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised either way. What I would be surprised of, again, is you start looking at people like Jose Iglesias, what is his value going into next year? And is he going to be able to, I mean, look, these guys are in it to try to get themselves all set up. And, so what is going to be the value? What's going to be the price tag? All that stuff is going to be coming into play. And like I said, it could go either way. I know one thing, they'll be looking at what is available and what can be done. I know that every move that is being made to strengthen this club for the future. This isn't one of those where they're just looking at, okay, how can we just stay 500 and stay competitive? Mr. Castellini wants a winner, and there is no doubt about that. So they're going to be in a position. They're going to keep on. They're going to keep moving and trying to do what's best for the club.
So they lose 2 out of 3 against the Rangers over the weekend. Now they'll play a 3-game series now at home against the Astros this week before going on the road to Milwaukee this weekend. What do you expect this week?
How about that Astros team? I mean, really, you're looking at a situation with these guys. I mean, they're good. I mean, you look at Texas, and they're second in the division. 8.5 games back, 9 games back, whatever it was yesterday. The Houston Astros are a very, very good baseball team, 48-24 as they get ready to come in here. We got Steele on the mound tonight. Obviously, he always gives us the best opportunity to control the other team's bats. He's going against Miley, who's looking pretty good. He's 6-3 right now. We have Verlander, who's going to be going against us on Tuesday, and then Cole is going to be going against us on Wednesday afternoon. So I'm looking forward to watching it. Let me put it that way. Houston is one of the premier teams in baseball, and to the point we were talking about before, when is this team going to start making a move forward? These are the kind of clubs that you have to beat. And like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing Castillo out there tonight. Hopefully he'll have his usual tremendous outing and give us a chance in that one. DeSclafani and Verlander tomorrow, and then Malley against Cole on Wednesday. Like I said, as a fan, I'm excited about watching it. As a member of the organization, I'm very hopeful that this might be that series where people say, "Hey, look at what the Reds team did against Houston." That's where I'm going to go ahead and put my hopes mainly. Let's hope for a series win.
Yeah, we definitely hope for a series win. Joe Zerhusen, who is with the Reds organization, joining us here on Heartland Sports Live, helps us here at 106.1 ESPN Radio. Joe, the reason we brought you on is because you had some promotions you wanted to talk about, or wanted us to talk about in particular, coming up for Cincinnati. So let's talk about some of those promotions. What do the Reds have going on?
Well, one of the biggest events, I mean, as you know, the 150th anniversary is a celebration that's going on all year. Phil Castellini, who is our chief operating officer, he's a showman, and he likes doing things big. So Friday, July the 5th, we have the Rockin' 150, which is going to be an event that will take place on Friday evening. We have some shows that are going to be a part of that event, and I know ex-ambassadors are going to be playing. Philip Phillips going to have some fireworks that are going to be wrapping it up on Friday night. So that's a big event that's coming up. We always have something going on at the ballpark. Yesterday we had the Barry Larkin edition of we have a bobblehead series that's going on right now, and we have Barry Larkin joining Joe Morgan and as a part of that, and also Ernie Lombardi. So it's kind of a backdrop behind a set of bobbleheads. So that's the bobblehead series is always good. We had a nice Father's Day promotion yesterday. As far as things that are coming up, we have always promoting the Cleveland series rather heavily because of the fact that the battle for Ohio with the Indians. The Ohio Cup starts here on Saturday, July 6th and the 7th. 1-1 is where that series is right now. So that's going to be a fun event coming up. And as we look ahead into the month of July, as we get through June and into July, after the All-Star break, we're going to have a little bit more action here at Great American Ballpark. It's been not slow, but we haven't really had any long homestands. But as we get into July and toward late into the month, we'll do a little bit more. I know there's a Yasiel Puig bobblehead coming up. The whole trend with the Funko Pop Suarez is our addition to it this year. And also at the end of July, the final installment in the 150 series bobblehead, that'll be Tony Perez. That'll be taking place at the end of the month. So always something going on here at the ballpark. Big thing right now looking ahead is the Rockin' 150. If you want information on it, obviously the best place to go is Reds.com, and you can find out everything you want to know right there.
He's Joe Zerhusen, broadcast and affiliates manager at Great American Ballpark. Joe, as always, I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Always a pleasure, Trevor. Thank you. You have a great day, and again, thanks for everything you guys do for us.
Joe Zerhusen there with the Cincinnati Reds on Heartland Sports Live. I want to thank him. I want to thank Phil Steele for joining me here in the last segment, previewing his 2019 college football magazine. We're already looking ahead to the college football season, people. It'll be here before you know it. We'll have Mike Keith here in the future, I have a feeling, because the Titans' preseason games will begin in August. Oh, I love gridiron action. It's almost that time of year, people. Just hang in there. Just a couple months to go. Trevor Rice with you at Heartland Sports Live. Follow me on social media at Radio Trevor Rice on Twitter. You can like me on Facebook as well, Trevor Rice on -air. Heartland Sports Live is Mondays, 5 until 6. See you next Monday.